Today we're talking about cruising versus land tours. Now, I know we're in coronavirus currently, at least if you're watching this when I've put this on YouTube, we're in coronavirus currently, but that doesn't mean that you're not planning future travel, because travel is coming back and a lot of people are going ahead and planning for 2021. So I wanted to film this video today so that you could have a good comparison so you know which one's going to be better for what you're looking for what vacation that you want to take. Be sure to stay tuned to the very end where I'm going to actually do a real cost comparison between a cruise and a land option, and let's see which one wins out in the end and which one's going to be the best for you. Now, before I jump into that, I just want to let you know I have a brand new resource available, which is a free travel planning guide, and it covers all of my helpful tips and tricks, the secrets that professionals use to plan their vacations, and I have it linked below. You can get it absolutely free. Go ahead and head over to my website where you can download it. Don't forget. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into cruising versus land-based travel. Now, the first thing that I want to compare is accommodations. By accommodations, I mean the type of room that you're going to get. So in a hotel, obviously, the type of room you can get and all of the different options you can have in the world of hotels. In cruising, the type of accommodations you can get there, the cabins that you can get there, and what your options are there. Now, cruising, just like hotels, has different levels. So for instance, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. On cruising, you have the same thing. So at the bottom, or the 3-star-ish level, you have cruise lines such as Carnival, Royal Caribbean, and Norwegian. And in the middle tier, you have cruise lines such as Celebrity, Holland America, Princess. And then above that, you actually have, even though they do have 5 stars, there's even tiers within the 5-star. So at the very edge of that, you might have Crystal Cruises. You have the new Virgin Voyages that's coming out. That's going to be a more upscale cruise line. You have the new Four Seasons, I believe it is. Is it Four Seasons? I'll verify and link it up here. But one of the hotel chains just coming, I believe it's Four Seasons, came out with their own cruise line. And then even above that, you have Silver Sea and Seabourn. And then on top of that, you even have river cruises, which have their own levels as far as 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. So as many different options as there are hotels, there's also that many options in cruising. And if you've never cruised before, there's certain levels of rooms and they have different prices within each type of cruise line. So just like in hotels, if you are facing the garden, you might be a cheaper price than if you're facing the ocean. If you have, right by the elevator, it might be a little bit cheaper than if you have, the penthouse suite. So the same thing in hotels holds true for cruises. So usually the very cheapest cabin that you can get in a cruise is an inside cabin, which means it's usually on the interior of the ship. So you do not have any windows in that cabin, which may or may not be a problem. If you spend most of your time out in exploring the ship or out in your destinations, in your ports, it might not matter if you have it. And if you're trying to be budget conscious, that might be the best option for you. But for the next level up, you could actually have a window in your room, which would be really nice. It's always nice if you can see out. And then above that, you have balcony rooms, which are my personal favorite, because then as you're having those cruise days, these days where you're at sea the entire day, you can, if you want to have coffee on your balcony in the morning and have a view of the ocean or whatever scenery you're passing by. That's why I kind of like that, but that's going to be your third step up. So more expensive than those inside cabins. And then above that, you have all sorts of levels of suites and different things that you can get depending on the cruise line. So just like with hotels, with cruises, you can have different price levels and different styles of rooms. So even if you're at a 3-star cruise line and you get the suite, you could still, pay more, but you could still get luxury even in a 3-star cruise line. So it just depends on the kind of room that you have. But in regard to accommodations, I would say they're pretty equal, because you could get different levels for whether you're doing land-based hotels or cruising. Really quick before we move on to the next thing, excuse me, I want to mention one of the benefits of cruising versus the hotel stays in regard to accommodations and only accommodations. When you are on a cruise, and you're visiting several different cities, you only have to unpack once. So you get to stay in the same cabin, and depending on the length of your cruise, you could be going to 12 different cities, but you're only in one cabin, you only unpack once, and you only have to worry about moving rooms once. If you're doing land-based, of course, and you see 12 cities, you're gonna be packing and unpacking and traveling in between all 12 cities. All right, next thing I wanna compare is food and drink. So with cruising and with hotels, there are some pluses and some minuses. With food on cruises, the good thing is cruises include all of your meals, which is fantastic in regard to value. So if you're wanting one price, all inclusive, cruising is a great way to go. Now, this is great as far as value because it's all inclusive and you can eat as much as you want. And anybody who's cruised before knows that part of the experience is stuffing yourself silly. But if you get really sick of the food, which honestly, depending on how long your cruise is, you may or may not get sick of the food. They change up the options, but it's the same chefs and it's the same quality. And so if you don't particularly like the food, you're still stuck with that for all 12 days. Except for, if you go into your destinations, of course you can eat in those cities, but usually for dinner and breakfast, at least, you are most likely eating on the ship. And especially if you're trying to save money, then you're probably going to eat on the ship most of the time. Versus hotels, which of course, if you're in a city, say you have a hotel in London, you have all of London to eat in. So if you get sick of one restaurant, you don't like one restaurant, you can always go to a bunch of different restaurants. So that I guess is my point to that. So that's with regard to food. Now drink varies as well. Whether you drink alcohol or not, whether it's just coffee and sodas that you're looking for, some of the lower level cruise lines do not include coffee and soft drinks, and most of them do not include alcohol. Nowadays with coronavirus, a lot of them are offering these new drink packages, but it's usually extra. So you usually have to pay to get free drinks, and it's not even free, you're paying, but you have to pay for a package to get unlimited drinks. And again, this includes typically soft drinks as well as coffee. If you get just plain coffee, that's usually not extra, but if you get lattes or any specialty coffees, that's usually you have to pay extra. And so they sell you these packages. So if you want any drinks other than water, plain coffee, and perhaps maybe some lemonade or tea, you're gonna pay extra for that. With regard to the drink packages, okay, so if it's a package, does that mean it's cheaper than if I were buying every single drink separately? Well, it depends, because there's some drink packages lately that I've seen with regard to alcohol. So you get unlimited alcohol. I think you get up to 12 drinks a day, which is quite a lot, but I guess it depends on how much you drink. But it would be about $60 per day per person. For me, I might have, say I have a cocktail by the pool, maybe two, and then maybe I have a couple cocktails at dinner. Say I just drank the most I ever drank, and say I had 2 cocktails at the pool and another 2 cocktails at dinner, or 2 glasses of wine at dinner, and then say I had another 2 to 3 glasses after. That is still only 7 drinks. I don't think I could drink 12 unless I started it first thing in the morning, and maybe you might. I don't know you. It's up to you. But I felt like for me personally, I was never able to drink enough to make the package worth it. So in that regard, I feel like the non-packaged stuff, so like a hotel, would probably be more cost effective for me because I would only pay for what I drink and I wouldn't overpay, which I felt I was doing when I was on the cruise and with those cruise drink packages. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is activities and entertainment. All right, on the cruise line, it's really cool because nowadays a lot of the cruise lines have a lot to offer. Now, the funny thing is the cheaper cruise lines, the 3-star cruise lines, Carnival, Norwegian, Royal Caribbean, they actually have more activities available than your 5-star. But when you're paying 5-star rates and you are on the Seabourn, they are typically smaller ships with more personalized service. You have more staff per guest, so you get more customized service, you get higher quality everything, higher quality food, higher quality surroundings, higher quality rooms, everything. But you usually have less. You're not gonna have water slides and ice rinks and surfing off the back of the ship. But you will have typically a casino, you'll have pools, and you'll have spas, you'll have things of that nature. On the lower tier, on the 3-star, those are usually giant ships. They have, sometimes 4,000 and 5,000 people per ship. So the number of staff per person is less. You're gonna have more crowds at the buffet, more crowds at the pool, more crowds at all of the different activities, because there's 5,000 people on a ship. So that is one thing to consider depending on how you feel about that. But on those bigger ships, they typically have more. And I want to kind of show you what I mean. I'm on the Royal Caribbean site, and I am on the cruise that I'm going to use later for our cost comparison. It's the Anthem of the Seas. I just want to show you really quick some of the just incredible things that they have on cruise lines nowadays. Down here, you can see that they have an indoor skydiving. They usually have outdoor, movies by the pool and things of that nature. They have a surfing lagoon or surfing, wave on the back of the ship, so you can go surfing. I mean, you're not in the ocean, but you're in this surfing. I don't know how else to explain it, but you can see from the picture what I mean. These are things that are on the ship. I've also seen some that have entire ice rinks. I've seen some that have a outdoor stage with a show where people are diving into the water, and it's a show that you can see on the back of the ship. They also have, like I said, specialty restaurants. So for instance, Jamie Oliver on this particular ship has a restaurant that he has on that, different cuisines and different things that you can do. They also have different shows that they have available. Usually on the bigger ships, they have a lot of Broadway style shows. They have all different shows throughout the day. So there's a lot of entertainment options. There's a lot of things on the ship. There's a lot of things to do. But again, those lower ones are also going to be the most crowded. So, okay, yeah, you're going to have a pool, and you're probably going to have water slides, and you're going to have, I've even seen some that are almost like water slide tubes that go around the ship out on the outside, so you see the water and everything. It's a clear tube that you see. It's really cool, but there's 5,000 people on the ship or 4,000 people on the ship. So even those things are going to be really crowded. If that doesn't bother you, fantastic. The 3-star, the lower ships are going to have a ton of things for you to do. Plus, when you go on shore, you also have all of the things to do in that particular destination. So say you are touring, say you're going around the Caribbean. A lot of these ships have their own private island. So when you go to that particular private island, then you also have all of the activities they have available on that island, whether it's lounging by the beach in the adults only section, or an entire water park in the kids section, or scuba diving or snorkeling or any of those things. You also have all of the activities in the destinations that you go to. But that's kind of equivalent to when you're in a hotel. You have all of the destinations available in that city. The cruising just has all of the extra activities that you can do on at sea days when you're not in port, or in the evening and things of that nature. Okay, that being said, let's say you're on a cruise and every evening you have maybe a brand new show, but maybe you don't like the shows. Maybe you're not a gambler, and maybe you really don't like the crowds. Well, when you're on the ship, those are really your only options, and then you could maybe go back to your room. That's about it. Versus if you were on land, you had the whole city available to you. So if you didn't like the show at this place, you could go to a show at this place. You could go to dinner at a different place. You could go dancing. You could do other things. Versus on the ship, if you don't like the options available, those are your only options, and you're kind of stuck. So in regard to activities and events, it just depends on your style and what you're looking for, and whether you want to be limited to what's available. And maybe there's a ton available, but if you're on a higher level ship, there might not even be that much available, versus having the whole city available to you. And if you don't do a lot, then it doesn't matter either way. Okay, the next thing I want to talk to you about is destinations. Okay, in regard to destinations, I really love cruising for the ability to see a lot of cities in a short amount of time. Now, this isn't for everybody, and it's not always good, but if you are going, for instance, to a new area, a new country, say you've never been to Europe and you want to go to Europe, cruises are a great first time to Europe, simply because you can usually get a cruise that samples a lot of destinations. So you might get a Mediterranean cruise and be able to see many places between Spain, a little bit of France, Italy, Greece, and get a sampling of all those areas. You'll hit some of the highlights, the highlighted cities in some of those areas. Now, when you are on a cruise though, typically you are only in port for a few hours. You might be there for 10 hours, 12 hours, you might be there for 6 hours, depending on what port it is. You also run into the risk of if there's bad seas or bad weather, you might not be able to anchor in some of the ports and you might miss them altogether. But in general, you usually are in each port, let's say about 8 hours-ish. On average. Some cruise lines will let you stay overnight in the bigger cities, like for instance in Paris, they might let you stay overnight because it's quite far from where the ship actually docks. And so they want to give you some extra time. But regardless, you're still there for a limited length of time. So that's what I mean by it's great to sample a lot of different cities and then perhaps go back later and do a land-based vacation where you can really get in it and explore it more in depth. Or you do a cruise and then either start or finish in one of those cities that you liked so that you can explore further. So cruising is great to sample new areas. It's also great if you don't actually care about exploring the areas. If you just want to go to Cozumel and expend the day in Cozumel and experience what there is to experience, but you have no desire to explore further, then fine, then cruising is great. Or if you have a limited amount of time, like say you only have a week for vacation and you would just like to go see some new cities and you're not really needing to explore more in depth in those areas, cruising again is great. It's a great value. It's a great way to see those things and do those things. Where I don't recommend cruising is if you really want to get in and explore a new city. If you're not happy just hitting the highlights and then leaving. If you want to take your time. So one of the things I always recommend for my clients is not to try to overschedule your vacation. You know, if you're going to Europe for the first time, do not pack every single day with as many different sites as you could possibly see. You're going to be exhausted, you're going to forget half of them, and it's not going to be a good experience. Well, the same thing holds true on cruising. Say you're going to Europe for the first time and say you're stopping in London and you're trying to fit as much sightseeing in London as you can in those, say, 8 hours that you happen to be in port. If that's going to stress you out and if that's not what you're wanting, if you really want to see all of those sites and you really want to explore London, don't do it on a cruise. Just don't do it on a cruise. I would suggest going land-based so that you can really spend as much time as you want there and see all of the things you want to do at a pace that's more comfortable for you. So in that regard, I don't always recommend cruising for everybody. If you want to explore a new country, a new city, if you want to take your time, if you want to be more flexible in your amount of time, you don't want to limit yourself to just 8 hours. If you want to take your time seeing the sites, I always recommend land-based versus cruising, or make sure you add that city to either the beginning or the end of your cruise so that you can have the time you need to explore further. Okay, so those are the four main areas, and as it stands right now, I know it's kind of hard. Whether cruising or land-based is better. So let's move into cost comparisons and let's really get down to brass tacks and see which one is better. Alrighty, for cost comparisons, I have a few things already built out that I want to show you that we're going to do. Okay, so for this situation, I have picked Royal Caribbean. It is a 3-star level, what I consider a 3-star level cruise line. As we saw before, it is a cruise line that has a ton of stuff to do, which is great if you're gonna be traveling with kids. But just remember, it's gonna be a lot more packed. And so even the really cool stuff to do is going to be packed. So it's just something, if you don't mind that, then that's fine. But for our purposes, I picked a cruise that was started in London or Southampton, but London area, and went to France. We're going to go see Bordeaux. And we're going to go then over to Spain. We're going to go to Spain. Bilbao, and I'm probably not saying that right, and La Coruña. And then you're gonna cruise for another day, at sea day. This is what I mean by at sea days. It's the days it takes for them to get from place to place. And so you're on the ship the entire day, no port cities. So that's where you're gonna be limited to only what's available on the ship. And remember, all 4,000 other people are also limited to what's available on the ship. So that's why it can get pretty crowded. And then cruising day, and then you're going to finish up in Paris. And for the cruise, you're going to go back to London. So it's a round trip London cruise. It is 7 nights. Okay. Now, To compare this, I'm going to pretend that we're trying to do the same thing land-based, hitting the same cities in the same time periods. So what I've done is I've started in London and I've priced out a hotel in London. Then I've priced out a hotel 2 days later in Bordeaux. And then the very next day in Spain, the very next day in Bilbao, and then La Coruña. And if I'm saying Bilbao wrong, please somebody correct me and let me know. And then finishing up in Paris. But instead of going all the way back to London, I'm just saying we're going to spend 2 days in Paris. Because if you were doing this land-based, there'd be no reason to go back to London unless your round trip airfare was from London, in which case you could go back. But this is what I'm doing. So, all right, is what we've started off with was London. And what I've done is I've narrowed it down. I'm using Google Hotels, which if you haven't seen my Google Hotels video, I'll link it up here or here, wherever it is. And it goes through how to use Google Hotels to find the best prices and the best places to stay. So I've used Google Hotels for this, and what I did is I restricted it to just 3-star hotels. I have tried to pick 3-star hotels that are usually in the heart of the city or an area where you might want to stay that's next to a lot of different things, and also where I could recognizable names. So for instance, in London, I picked near the Tower of London because it's right smack in the middle of a lot of sightseeing, and also the DoubleTree by Hilton because it's a recognizable name. So for our purposes here, we're going to be starting here the night before the cruise, and then we depart for the cruise that I chose. We actually are going to depart on Friday, May 28th. So I have us getting in the night before and departing on the 28th. Now, you are likely going to do this regardless, because if you are leaving out of London, you typically cannot fly in that morning and then still board your ship. You usually want to get in the night before just to make sure you're there and you don't miss your flight. You don't miss your cruise. Because if you fly in the morning of your cruise and your flight is delayed or canceled or anything else happens, you miss your cruise, and so sorry. That's just how it goes. So I always recommend getting in the night or even earlier before. So this price, this hotel, we're going to use for both examples. So we're going to start in London, and then we're going to say that we're going to go over to Bordeaux next. Again, I've chosen a 3-star hotel in the center of the city. So in this case, it's right in the middle of Bordeaux and the port of Bordeaux. And so it's next to a lot of different things. And it was a good price point. So this is why I chose this one. From Bordeaux, we're going to follow the same itinerary that we will be following here on the cruise. And from Bordeaux, we're going to go to Bilbao. I swear, I'm so worried I'm saying that wrong. And for Bilbao, again, I've chosen one that is in the near all of the middle. I don't know if you can see this, but it's right here on the edge of all of the main things to do and see in this particular city. And then from there, we're going over to La Coruña, and same thing, chosen a 3-star hotel that is right here in the port near where you would land if you're cruising into the area, and easy distance from things. And then finally, we're going to be going to Paris, and I've chosen one near the Eiffel Tower so that you would be in the center of all of the things near the Louvre, near the Eiffel Tower, near all of those things that you would want to see. And this would be for the last 2 nights. Okay, so we're going to compare all of those hotels and to the cruising. Now, one of the other things that I haven't included yet is you have to be able to get to these places. You have to be able to get from, Bordeaux to Bilbao to La Coruña back to Paris. And how are you going to do that? Well, in Europe, the typically best way to do, you could rent a car, but a lot of times the easier way to do it is just simply to get a Eurail pass and take the train to all of these places. So I've also priced out a 7-day Eurail pass so that we can get from place to place to place. All right. Now, the only other thing I need to add in regard to hotels is food, because in cruising, your meals are included. In land-based, of course, you have to pay for your own meals. So I've gone ahead and added that to our price comparison as well. And I will show you that breakdown in just a moment. Now, one of the things I want to tell you about or show you or warn you about before I move into the price is notice that if we're following the exact same route as our cruise, we're only spending a day in each place. And part of that day is going to have to be spent traveling. And I just wanted to show you how far it really is. So for instance, when we go from Bilbao in Spain to Bordeaux, we are looking at the least
almost 6 hours to be able to get back and forth. And that is from a relatively short distance. If you followed this cruise line exactly and you were over here in La Coruña and you wanted to go back to Paris, which is up here, it would take a heck of a lot longer. So I just kind of want to qualify that. I'm doing this to be able to compare it as closely as possible. But in reality, if you go to these if you did a land-based tour, you would probably spend more than one night per city. You would have to, because simply getting back and forth would take up half of the day, and then you would have no time in the city. So this is just a fictitious representation. In reality, your land-based travel, you would extend it out. It wouldn't simply be 7 days. And if it was 7 days, you wouldn't be seeing all these cities. You would probably narrow it down so that you'd have enough time in each city. So just keep that in mind as we're comparing costs, because that ultimately might decide whether or not you choose cruise or land-based.
That being said, let's talk about price comparison and wrap up. Okay, sorry, that's really cheesy. But as you can see, I have listed the land-based, and again, it was one night in each city except for 2 nights in Paris. I've included the Eurail cost for your train, and then I've taken an average of $100 per day, and I got this from a website. I got this estimate from this website here, which is Nomadic. Gosh, I cannot talk today. Anyway, in regard to Europe, this is the estimates that he uses in regard to paying for food in Europe. And so what I've done is just taken each of these and broken it into 2 people, and I've come up with an average of $100 per day. Okay, so that's why I got this price here. So as you can see, this is what the land-based costs versus the cruise cost. And as you can see on cruising, your room is included, your meals are included, although you do have to pay for your drinks, which you're going to pay either way. So I haven't included a separate line item for that. You'll also get your transportation. So you're not needing to take a train because your cruise is taking you from city to city. But the only thing you do need to add is the hotel in London, because you would need to get in the night before. So as you can see from this comparison, they are exactly the same. All right. So which one's better? I mean, as I said before, the land option, you probably aren't going to stick to only 7 days and 1 day per city. It's just going to be not quite feasible enough to be able to get everywhere you want to get in the time frame that you've given yourself. So chances are the land program, if you build it out, could be more, could be less. You might reduce the number of cities you go to, and it might be the same cost, it might be cheaper, or you might expand it out and still want to see all of these cities, but you need more time, so you might be spending more on hotels, more on food. So all of that being said, which is better, cruising or land-based? And the answer is, it depends. It depends on you. It depends on what you're wanting to do. So if you only have a short period of time and you want to sample new areas and see a lot of new things, then I recommend doing a cruise. As you can see, because the cruise includes your meals, includes your transportation, your hotel, everything, or your accommodations, cruising could be a great value if you have a limited amount of time, you want to see a lot of different places, you are fine sampling different things, you would like to be able to just unpack once and not have to move from hotel, because it's going to be exhausting going to hotel, packing up, taking a train for 10 hours, unloading, doing it again, taking a train. It will be exhausting unless you give yourself enough time to be able to relax in between. So for those reasons, cruising is a great option. Now, nowadays, it also is, I know it's scary because of coronavirus, but they have done so many health and safety precautions now because of coronavirus that I feel like when it comes back, and most likely that'll be in 2021, they're saying fall of 2020, but I really think it's probably going to be 2021 before they're really fully back. They're going to have so many safety precautions, and you're probably going to have to take your temperature when you get on, every time you get on the ship, and so many other things. I feel like it's going to be an okay option if you're comfortable with it. I know it might be a while before you're ever going to be comfortable with it. Maybe when the vaccine comes out, cruising is an option. But for all of those reasons, a cruising could be a great value and a great option for all of the things that I mentioned. Conversely, if you want to see more, travel more in depth. Even if you have a limited time, but you want to be able to truly get into a city and explore that city completely, then I recommend land-based, simply because it gives you the flexibility to explore as much as you want. Also, if you don't like crowds, I would recommend either getting on a higher level ship, a 5-star ship or 4-star ship that's smaller with less crowds, or going to a city that's not as crowded or at a time when it's not as crowded. And land-based, I feel like, gives you a little more flexibility in that regard. Land-based also if you have a little more money to spend. So although my price comparison showed they're about the same, chances are with land-based you're going to be spending more, because you either are going to stay longer in those cities so you can see more, or if you just pare it down to a couple cities, but you're going to be staying longer in each city. But one thing I didn't include on the land option is activities, entertainment, things of that nature that you will be paying extra for. So the land option is great if you have a little more in your budget, or you have at least the flexibility to spend more if you want to, and you really want to get in and see a city in depth and explore it or experience it from a local's perspective. When you're doing a cruise and you're only there for 8 hours, there's no way you're going to be able to really get a local's perspective. You might be able to do a tour from a local, and they might be able to give you some good insight, but unless you can really spend more time in that city, there's a limit to what you can understand about that city or see in that city. So that's the key difference there. So that ultimately I feel is where you decide which one is better for you. So anyway, I know that was a long, convoluted way for a not definitive answer, and I'm sorry that it's not definitive, but we are all individuals. We have different things that we want to do. We have different budgets. We have different expectations of our vacations. And so I'm hoping that I was able to clarify at least a little bit the options between cruising and land-based so that you can make the best decision for you on your next vacation. Alrighty, so if you decide that you want to explore more about hotels, I went ahead and created a video all about Google Hotels, which I will put up right here. And it talks about how to use Google Hotels, explore, find the best pricing, everything regarding getting your hotel for your land-based program. Or if you're cruising, the hotel before or after. And then if you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting the subscribe. I will be coming to you shortly with more cruise videos as we get closer to cruising coming back into our life. And other than that, I hope you have a fantastic day, and I will see you on the next video. Bye-bye.